What is up, everybody? I am Damon Speaks, and welcome to the Damon Speaks Show. Tonight, it's election eve. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I have assembled a panel of distinguished gentlemen, and I think that you are going to enjoy this conversation. So wherever you are watching this from, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, hit that like button on Facebook. Tune in every week, Monday nights at 8 p.m. for the Damon Speaks Show. So every person that I have spoken to today has been on edge. In some shape, some form, some fashion, everyone is anxious. There are people honking outside. There are people that are boarding up places downtown. So I just want to take a minute to say that at this time, self-care is of utmost importance. You have to put on your oxygen mask first. Of course, we want to save our friends. We want to be concerned about everyone. That's why we're working so hard to get the message out about voting. But if you're not taking care of yourself, if you can't help yourself, then you can't help anyone else. I often say, just like Jan Van Zant says, you cannot pour from an empty cup. And a lot of our cups are running on like a fourth of a tank right now. We're not very full. So take a moment to take care of yourself. Outside of voting, another idea that I've had this week is that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to mess up, and you're going to mess up bad. I have messed up in numerous ways, a lot. But one thing that I'm learning is that I must have grace for myself. I always give grace and forgiveness to others. But can I give it to myself? It can be incredibly difficult if you're not used to loving on yourself, if you're not used to offering yourself grace to do that. But I want to encourage you throughout this election season, throughout the holidays, and throughout the rest of this year to take care of yourself, to treat yourself well, to believe that you deserve good things and that all things will be well. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on these gentlemen, and they're going to each introduce themselves. Please welcome Mr. Anwar Musa, Brandon Hicks, and Jimmy Johnson. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Anwar, tell us a little bit about yourself. And also tell me, what was the first election you voted in?
The first election I voted in was 2004. And the first election I was really involved in was 2000. I was a senior in high school. And so it was like just a whole lot going on. I'm from Detroit. I am Anwar. I am really good friends with Bernard. And I am probably the person who has yelled at him the most about politics for the last 20 years and the importance of participating in the political process. I really want to be here just as a regular person. Like we talked a lot about this. And yes, I am a vice president of a tech company. Yes, I've worked my way up in the hotel industry, all these other things. But really, you don't have to be anyone credentialed to be involved and to care about politics. So I am here to just be a regular person and talk about the things that regular people care about and try to give regular people resources to where they can go to find information about where and how they should vote.
Jimmy, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is James Johnson. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. I am a retired Air Force air traffic controller, a retired FedEx technical writer, and I currently do business consulting through a firm I co-founded, Small Planet Works Incorporated, here and around the country. The first election that I voted in was the 2000 election, and there are some severe reasons for that, but it was the 2000 election. That was also the time that I became intimately involved in politics with an organization called the Commission on Religion and Racism, headed by a Dr. Isaac Richmond, here in the city of Memphis and surrounding the tri-state area, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi. At that time, I became managing editor of the African American Voice Journal, which was the communication arm of that organization. I am currently Vice President in charge of operations at Small Planet Works. I'm very happy to be with you this evening, and hopefully I can contribute something of value to this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Brandon Hicks, introduce yourself and let us know what was the first election you voted in.
Hey, I'm Brandon Hicks. My day job, I serve as Director of African American Affairs for Governor Cuomo. The first election I participated in was my senior year of high school, 2008, the first Obama election. So that was super exciting. So first time I voted. Senior, I think it was my freshman year of college. He won that election. It was super exciting. The first time I voted was for a Black man. So
that's amazing. Anwar, tell us, when did you become aware that you needed to be involved and aware of politics? And what were your thoughts maybe before that? Were you not interested? Did you think that it didn't affect you?
Is in utero an answer? Because like I was actually thinking, I lied, because the first election I voted in was whatever local election was in Highland Park, whatever day it was after I turned 18. Like we all talk about presidential elections, but I absolutely voted in everything I could vote in. My parents were both heavily involved in the civil rights movement, and my grandparents were as well. And I was fortunate enough to grow up with a grandfather who was born in the early 20s and lived through the Depression and lived through so many things. So I constantly got to hear about the Black experience and Black history from the perspective of Black people who weren't necessarily ashamed of our history, and talked about our power and how these systems were created to keep us in a certain place in a society. So I've always been very aware of politics. My dad used to watch PBS, and I used to listen to Mildred Gaddis in the morning in, like, I don't know, third grade every morning on the way to school. So I've always understood that. And it's just interesting to look at the world to understand what happens when people don't participate in politics. We get a system that atrophies like the one we have now. But I was very privileged to learn that.
Brandon, but prior to this 2008 election, were you intimately aware of politics and how they worked? Or what were your thoughts before that? How did you become involved?
well, Sundays before church, my grandmother would watch like Bobby Jones and Meet the Press with Tim Russert. So those like are the time I have with my grandma, my grandfather. So I mean, it was always like in the background politics.
I think it's important, like both of you have said, that your parents, that your families have been involved. And it's important for generations that are coming after us to see the process, to be involved. So it's really important that we like teach our kids and that we involve the younger community. Jimmy, you stated that the first election that you voted in was in 2000. Tell us about that.
Well, it was the Bush v. Gore election. And as I said, I had become involved with the Commission on Religion and Racism. And this election had brought up a lot of issues. At the same time, my company had won a contract with the Shelby County Election Commission. And this elections administrator named James Johnson, a different person entirely, named James Johnson, said, I won't hire a person who is not registered to vote. And so I registered to vote. I became enmeshed in what was happening. And as I began to learn and understand how voting actually occurred and who was in charge of it, and all of the things that could come out of it, I became more involved. And I did vote during that Bush v. Gore election. The years prior to that, I was in the military, and I had a personal conflict. As you know, the civilian authority has authority over the military, and we are not allowed to be politically involved while in uniform. Well, to avoid having any of those issues, I was not politically involved at all during the 22 years that I was in the military. I stayed aware of things that happened. I would have made some terrible mistakes had I been politically active. For instance, I would have voted for, believe it or not, I would have voted for Wallace back in the day because I was in the military and he supported the military. I would have voted for Reagan for the same reason, that I was in the military and he supported the military. Reagan gave the military an 11% raise, the largest raise we'd ever had. Raise was so large for me, it put me into a different tax bracket and I actually took home less pay. But for those reasons, I would have voted. That was against my personal interest as a Black person. But none of that mattered because I was one of those subsets. And so all of these things played a part, and I did in 2000, and I've been voting in every election that comes around anywhere near me since then, because they are that important.
Tell me, I read something that was alarming. It was a meme that I saw on social media. It said in 2016, Trump won Wisconsin by 23,000 votes. In Milwaukee alone, 93,000 Blacks didn't vote. Trump won Florida by 113,000 votes. In Miami alone, 379,000 Blacks didn't vote. Trump won Michigan by 11,000 votes. In Detroit alone, just one city, 277,000 Blacks didn't vote. We can definitely talk about voter suppression, but outside of voter suppression, what's at play here? Why are there so many Black people that didn't vote in 2016 and maybe aren't planning to vote tomorrow?
I have a couple clarifying questions. Is that the Black population or eligible voters in those places? Because Florida does not allow felons to vote. People, I think in the last election, they did pass a ballot measure, and then their governor or their state legislature and governor are trying to overturn that. So the reason I'm asking that is because that is a big part of it. If that is it, 1 in 3 Black men go to prison if you become a felon and you lose your right to vote. Detroit had 1 million Black people in at one point. That, those are half Black men. That means 1 in 3 of those went to jail, right? So like that's one of the questions is, could you actually vote? My second question my second comment on that would be, yeah, that's disappointing. What the real number is.
I'm not actually sure if it's eligible voters or not. Either way, those numbers are alarming to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering what you think is at play. Obviously, of course, there's the felon thing. I mean, there are a lot of things. Brandon, what do you think could be possibly a reason why?
When you're selling a product, it's the seller's job to convince the buyer that it's worth buying, right?
Amen.
So if somebody doesn't buy my product, I can't get mad at them for not seeing the value if I haven't convinced them.
Preach.
So I think that more effort probably should have been spent going towards Black communities and not just assuming that because Obama had such high numbers that Hillary would have got those same high numbers. So I don't shame Black people for not participating. But I do encourage folks who want those votes to really go out and to get those votes and put the same effort that you would put towards any other community. But should everybody participate? Yes. But if you're not being convinced, you're not being convinced.
I think that's a super important point to make. And what I've seen a lot is people being shamed for not voting. And I don't think that is necessarily the best tactic whereby to get people to go out and possibly risk exposure.
Shaming is wrong, period. And we have gotten to this culture in America of vote shaming. Like even you saw it in 2016, like there's a false narrative that Bernie Sanders voters are why Hillary Clinton lost. That's not true. Factually, it's not true. And to Brandon's point, if you don't it's the politician's job to earn the vote, not the other way around. And so we've forgotten that. And I think this assumptive politics that we have is that because Black people are a captured constituency, they have to vote for us. So they're going to vote for the guy who's like literally supporting the Klan. So then they don't do anything else for us and then you don't understand the value of it. So I really think that we talk a lot about our responsibility, but we should hold people accountable who do get our votes and don't do anything for us anyway, or they didn't come try to vote for us. Then go after people who are trying to come get your vote.
Jimmy, anything?
Yes, I agree with both Anwar and Brandon in that our votes should be of value to the politicians. But then if they're not of value to the politicians, then get us some new politicians.
There you go.
Okay? In order to do that, though, we have to be involved. We have to get them to understand that we won't accept just anything, and we will not accept being ignored. Now, a lot of young people in the 2016 election said, well, I don't like Hillary and I don't like Trump, so I'll sit this one out. Well, now those mindsets we have to change, because there's always a choice for us as black people. There's always a choice that's better than the other. And I think we found out during these last 4 years that, yeah, we didn't like her. She wasn't the greatest thing for us, but he's 10 times worse. And sitting it out was not the thing to do. And so we have to be prepared to make those choices. And we also have to be prepared to make them understand how valuable our vote is. We're getting there slowly but surely. Every pundit is now talking about the black vote, the black vote, the black female vote. Every pundit is talking about that and where it's going to go. Well, we've got to secure something for that vote.
I have a question for Brandon. I'm sorry just to take this over now, but I'm just interested because like we're talking about this and we've talked about like people not thinking their vote matters because we're so focused on national elections, which they do matter, but they're like the math, the arithmetic, probably is a better way to say, of national politics is very different than local elections. And so to like Jimmy's point, I would wonder what would happen if black people in a city decided to vote for one candidate or another in a primary? Like, would a state Democratic Party, Brandon, take notice of that? That like black voters in New York are voting for specific ballot measures or certain policies, and how does that flow up into national politics? And I think that that's another way that we could, maybe it doesn't matter if you're in Texas, how you vote, or actually Texas matters quite a bit. Maybe it doesn't matter if you're in Arkansas for the president, but in your little small town, it might matter a lot if every black person votes against somebody, if you don't have a large population. Like Memphis is a place like that, where like you could actually change quite a bit. So I'm wondering, how does that like flow up the political ladder?
I mean, it's all about numbers, right? In democracy, whoever has the most votes wins. So, I mean, it's really important that when you see something that you don't like, that you definitely act, like you said, in every election. And coalition building is a big part of that, right? The black vote alone, we're only 12% of the U.S. population. So with hope in our vote, I mean, it definitely has an impact, but in some places, there's not a large black population, right? So, I mean, it's definitely, coalition building is really important in instances like that.
So what I'm
may I? Anwar, in 1991, Memphis elected its first black mayor.
Mm-hmm.
He won by 146 votes in an election where 250,000 votes were cast.
Right.
He won by 146 votes. But prior to the time that happened, the black citizenry came together and said, this is our candidate, period. There will be no competition for this candidate from our community. And we all went with that. Again, He won the election by 146 votes, subsequently re-elected 5 times. Memphis is a city that's 65% African American. There's no reason why we should not have had an African American mayor of the city.
Mm-hmm.
But it took focus to get it done. Now, it doesn't make us all one, but when we all have the same focus, when it's all in our best interest to do this thing, then we should be able to come together and do that. And when we do, those are the types of results that we get. And we have the ability to get. The Montgomery bus boycott was the same thing. That's the same thing. That broke the back of segregation in Montgomery. It wasn't because they felt like they wanted to do something great. It was because those buses weren't running and they were losing money for over a year. And they said, okay, fine, you can ride anywhere on the bus. We're not going to make you ride on the back of the bus anymore. Just get on the bus. That's the power that we have when we choose to exercise it. We understand it and choose to exercise it.
Yes.
So I'm hearing that there is definitely power in our vote, and that Black people want to choose a candidate that has their best interest in mind, and that's actually going to have policies and programs that are going to help us. What, if anything, has this current administration done to help the Black community? Let's start with that. I mean, obviously there are things that have not been done and that have been actually done to put us back. Is there anything that has been redeeming, as you see it, for the Black community from this current administration?
Just when you factor in the fact that he separated over 500 children from their families, and he's called African countries and Caribbean countries shithole countries. He stacked the courts with conservative judges who reduce reproductive health care and pass anti-LGBT rights. I mean, on average, I just don't see how any funding for an HBCU or pardoning a couple people for crack disparities, I don't see how that outweighs the trauma that he's imposed on children, South American children, and the damage that he's doing to our courts. So, I mean, yes, he's done some things, but when you factor in all the things that he's damaged, the institutions and our reputation around the world, I just don't think that there's really an argument to justify voting for Trump.
I think that both of you, though, are touching on something really interesting to me, which is the idea of, like I said earlier, the arithmetic of politics, right? Like, unfortunately, in America, because we have not achieved full equality, Black people don't get to be single issue voters. Like, there are a ton of people who are like, I just care about abortion and that's it, and nothing else matters. But for even a Black person of means, right? Like, if you, depends on how much money you have if you're Black. Because if you're some people who are Black, he gave you a big tax cut. But America stealing money from rich Black people is America 101. Like, America has been doing that since we got out of slavery. So that doesn't matter if he gave you a tax cut, because the system is designed so that your descendants are in poverty within 2 generations of you because of how all of that works. So we have to start to come together and think about, like, maybe he did something for one sliver for an individual, but what is the total impact of this person's time in office? And that's not just Trump, though. We should also look at every politician who represents us and says, what is their total impact to my life? Not what do they look like, not do they come to my AME church, as Freddie said earlier, not do they do certain things, but what was how did they vote, and how did they legislate? How did they judge on the bench? How did they lead from the executive branch? And how did that impact the lives of Black people as a whole? And I think we would be much better off if we started looking at things from that perspective, because there'd be a whole lot of folks who look like us who may not be in office if we actually did that.
Well, for my money, in my opinion, the only thing that Trump has done for us as the Black community is make us know why we should vote for the other people.
Come on, silver lining in the storm.
That's the only thing that he has done. And now You will always find exceptions. Okay, you will always find exceptions because he will. Those types of things will always have someone where they've done something for them personally,
Mm-hmm.
and that person. There's a woman, Alice Marie Johnson. She's from here, as a matter of fact. No relation to me. Alice Marie Johnson. She was her sentence. She had a life sentence for drugs, trafficking with drugs. He commuted her sentence. Now, and this is a black woman, okay, and she was very thankful. But then that wasn't enough. She allowed herself to be used by this out and out racist. She went to the Republican convention and spoke at the convention. Donald Trump is a wonderful man. No, Donald Trump is not. He was a wonderful man to me. He did me a great service. But for my people, he has done absolutely nothing. And this is where we also have to learn to draw lines. It's not about me all the time. I have to think about my people. I have to think about the guy next door. I have to think about the guy down the street and the guy that's going to come behind me.
Yep.
I have to think about that. If I don't, I'm doing a disservice to my community. And those individuals, yes, Trump can point to them, and he often does. He often will stand at his podium and say, my African Americans, because he still owns them. But he has done nothing for our community. Our unemployment, he talks about that. I've done more for the black community than any president since Abraham Lincoln. Well, our unemployment rate is at 15%. The white unemployment rate's at 10%. And that 5-point difference between the two is the widest gap since 2015. So what has he done since 2016 until now? He didn't do anything for unemployment. So, and it goes on and on and on. And I know Brandon, having worked for Cuomo, he knows those individual facts inside out when it comes to COVID. What has he done in our community? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We're dying from COVID at a greater rate than anyone else. And he wants to say he's done something for our community?
I mean,
here's what I'm just sorry, I'm jumping. I also think the one thing we have to start thinking about is what does it mean to do something for a community, right? What do we expect from our politicians? And I think that we talked about that a little bit earlier. So many people expect nothing. They literally don't expect anything. They believe that they are throwing their vote away. They don't think that a politician or policies can change the quality of their life, the type of schools their kids go to. Like, they just don't see it that way. And we should expect that from our politicians. We should look at our schools. We should look at our communities. We should look at those places and say, you represent me. Why is my stuff like this? And then hold those people accountable. But if we don't expect anything from them, then Donald Trump getting one person out of jail, it's like, well, he did do something. Like, look, he's actually he did sign a new legislation that was like an adjustment to criminal, and it made some moves towards criminal justice reform. But those are not meaningful moves if you put it in the context of everything else, and you're expecting nothing, then crumbs is okay. But I think that that's not true. Like, what I want to make sure we do is don't just vote tomorrow and then go home and expect nothing from Joe Biden, even if he wins, right? Don't vote for a senator. Don't vote for a state legislator. Don't vote for a judge and expect nothing after that day. Follow up. What did that person do, right? And then don't vote for them again if they didn't do what you thought they were going to, or support them again if you thought they were going to. Like, that to me is really the connection that people aren't drawing is you should expect more out of your government, and that's what it's there for. It's not actually there to be a foot on your neck, or doesn't have to be.
That's a great point. And to that point, what needs to happen? I'll start with Brandon. What needs to happen? What can a Biden-Harris administration do for the Black community within the first 100 days? But really in the whole like the time they're in office, but really in that first 100 days, because it's really important. So what needs to be done? What's like the first thing or very important thing?
Okay. So there's this summer, all we talked about was Black Lives Matter and COVID-19. So first thing needs to do, and Biden-Harris administration needs to do, is to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And this act has a number of reforms that speak to the issues that we were talking about this summer when we were protesting for Black lives. The second thing is the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We know that the Voting Rights Act has been gutted by the Supreme Court in the last few years. And so this act will strengthen voting rights. And for us, as far as policing, voting rights, we need some financial support. You talked about the unemployment rate, Mr. Johnson. We definitely need some. We need some student loan forgiveness. We need things that would definitely positively impact Black folks economically. And so there are a number of things that can be done on that front. But the two major things I'm focused on are police reform and voting rights.
Jimmy?
Well, the way I see it is that all of our social ills in our community, they begin and end in poverty. So the first thing that we want to do is to move the poverty needle. We really want to get rid of it, because everything else will follow. So in order to do that, I believe that we need an economic initiative. Now, everybody's running around talking about $15 an hour. To me, that's not a livable wage. That doesn't lift you out of poverty. You need $20, $25 an hour. I realize that that's not going to happen anytime soon, but we need to work towards that. That's number one. The second thing is that we need to either reinitiate the Affordable Care Act, polish it off, and add a public option. I think everyone should realize by now that having your health care tied to your job is not such a great idea, because your job goes away, there goes your health care. And your job doesn't necessarily go away because you do something wrong and you throw away your job. It could be because of COVID. But either way, you don't have it, and now what? Okay, so that's not a good idea. And this is one of the few industrialized countries where healthcare is not a right. It should be. In this country, healthcare is not healthcare, really. It's sick care. They want you to be sick so they can sell you all the drugs. They don't want you to be healthy. You can't get healthcare that has preventive care built into it. You have to pay extra for that. Okay, enough preaching. So you got your financial end, and you've got your healthcare end. Now, I also believe that any working parent making less than $60,000 a year shouldn't have to worry about child care. They should have a place where they can go and leave their child that's safe, nurturing, nourishing, where they can go and earn the living that's necessary and come back home and not have to worry about giving up half of their paycheck to have their child cared for.
Right.
So all of those things are necessary within our community. Now, I'll say something really big. When I say that we talk about poverty and getting rid of poverty means that we don't have these ills, think about it. If I have a BMW, I don't have any need to steal yours. If I have a nice home to live in, I don't have any need to vandalize yours. If I have all of the things that I need in life, I don't have any need to go out and acquire yours. But if I'm looking at life as it is, and I see you coming and going every day in your nice BMW, and I know that I don't have a snowball's chance of ever getting that, then I might just want to joyride just one time. So I go steal your BMW just for that joyride because I'm never going to get that. But if I had my own, yours would be of no value to me.
Anwar?
Well, these gentlemen both gave you concrete policy initiatives, so I'm going to wax poetic for a second. And we have all heard this, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator with an inalienable right for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Black folks are still waiting to get life. We don't have liberty completely, and we definitely are not free to pursue our happiness. So what I would love to see from a Biden-Harris administration is real concrete steps, everything these gentlemen talked about, right? Like life is just, I would love to know that I can walk down the street. I'm not even going to ask America not to kill me because that's a big ask. It's been killing Black men since before it was America. I get it. It's hard to, get off of your addiction. I just would like to know that my family would get justice and that I won't be tried in the court of public opinion when I did nothing wrong to be killed, by someone I pay, quite honestly, right? So that means criminal justice reform and real criminal justice reform. And actually, I would love to see not just Biden-Harris administration, not just the executive branch, but if there's actually a blue wave and we have the Senate and the House, please pass real legislation that removes the Supreme Court from the conversation, right? Qualified immunity, a lot of those things are decisions that were made. We could pass a law that says these things are not okay. To both of their points, the ability to end the school to prison pipeline. Like I went to a high school where there were mushrooms growing in the walls because we had no money, because Betsy DeVos started that nonsense that she started in Detroit when I was in high school. So I'd love to see the Biden-Harris administration actually invest in inner city schools and actually do something to try and make education at all levels more affordable, even if I don't think free college is a thing for these folks, but even if it's free community college or trade schools, ways to give people access to other choices. Unfortunately, in the world we live in, there is a school to prison and a school to military pipeline. Either way, they're going to get our free labor. A lot of Black folks can't just go to school and follow our dreams because we don't have a social safety net. So we can't ever reimagine the world or change the world or make a new business because we got to pay bills. So I'd love to see an administration actually realize that and help Black folks actually achieve 2 out of the 3. I mean, I'd love to see pursuit of happiness, but like maybe life and liberty.
So obviously the 1994 crime bill and conversations around reform to our criminal justice system are hugely important. What were your takes? Let's start with you, Jimmy. What was your take in 1994 on the crime bill? And let's talk a little bit about how, people are blaming Biden and saying, this is what you did back then. Like, that's why I'm not going to vote for you. Let's talk a little bit about that. I want to know your thoughts.
Okay, let's talk about the 1994 crime bill. In 1994, my position was I don't want that drug dealer living next door to me either. I don't want my neighborhood shot up because that drug dealer is next door to me. I don't want my kids running around out in the street picking up needles that they're dropping here and there. And I don't want them selling my drugs to my kids. So I was one of those who supported the 1994 crime bill. I did not have the foresight to see that how it was going to adversely affect the Black community, especially Black men. But today, even, I don't want that drug dealer in my community selling drugs. I don't want my child living in a community where they can't go out and play because somebody might drive by and shoot them. I don't want those things in my community. I don't want my community destroyed and oppressed, but I don't want that. So I want the same things that everybody else wants. I want a clean, safe, healthy community for me and my family to grow up in. Now, what does it take to get that? Again, if we get rid of the poverty and we get rid of all of the things that cause that poverty, we have the education, we have the financial end, we have all of those things, then we don't have this crime. If black men had the ability to go out and be productive in corporate America, then there wouldn't be the room for that subculture. Some of the smartest black men in the world are involved in the drug trade.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're brilliant. They make millions. They don't live long. They make millions. Brilliant minds. But they couldn't get the break to make that same money over here in legitimate corporate America. So I understand all of that. But that doesn't mean that I want it. But I don't want my community destroyed either. So that's where I stand.
Brandon, thought?
I was 4 in '94, so I generally don't hold 30-year grudges. So Biden is my guy. There's nothing you can tell me about what he did in 1994, 1974 that's going to change my vote. He's better than Trump. It had adverse effect, but the goal, was like Mr. Jimmy said, was to keep people who were selling poison to their communities and shooting up their communities from continuing to do that. Was the punishment harsh? Yes, it was harsh. But again, drug dealers are not heroes. I mean, they are victims of an oppressive system, but they are themselves are not victims, right? These are adults who are engaged in crime, and there are penalties for crime, right? So we can definitely talk about how harsh should our punishment be, but by God, that ain't changing. So,
Anwar?
Yeah, no, it's not material to my vote because I'm not an idiot and I don't have a death wish, nor am I suicidal. So, like, that's why it doesn't really matter for me for that. But I think that what both of these gentlemen are talking about is same thing I feel about human beings. I feel about politicians, which I don't request perfection. I request growth, and I reward growth, right? Like, to everyone's point, I was 10 in 1994, so the shade. I do remember growing up in Highland Park, though, and like not being able to go to the corner of my street, and my cousin being robbed and having to walk home without his shoes and his coat, and just happy he wasn't dead, and knowing the distance and caliber of a weapon just from the sound of it. Like, I actually can still do that. It's, so like that. Those aren't great things, but we had a different understanding about what was happening at that time. I think that one thing that African Americans, Black folks can do is be more cognizant of the history of America, that usually anything that can become punitive is going to happen to us first. So we should be more a suspect of anything that is like crime and punishment. But at the same time, Black people love Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton advanced the crime bill and voted for that and put more of us in jail than Ronald Reagan did, who started the war on drugs. That was a Democratic administration that advanced that. And so what I think that I want to see from a Biden-Harris administration, and what I think needs to happen, is for both of them to acknowledge their role in the criminal justice system and the role in what it is in modern day slavery, because literally this is all to create free labor. And what would America be if not without free labor? And America's never not had free labor. And how they can actually talk about real meaningful change to that, which would show me that they understood the impact of their decision and how we can lead and listen and move and do something in the future that's different, especially since we've now had the conversation about opioids being addiction, right? It wasn't addiction when Black folks was on crack. It was we are going to jail, right? So if we have a better understanding, the whole point of the Constitution is that it's a living, breathing document, and the goal of America is to create a more perfect union where we learn by our mistakes. So if they can learn from mistakes and actually do something better, then I'm here for it, because hindsight is always 20/20. I shouldn't have had McDonald's on Saturday, but guess what? I did it, and it doesn't make me a bad person. Let's not do that again, because I'm still regretting it, right? Like, it's the same thing, and we just need to be able to ask real questions and hold our politicians accountable for their lack of growth, and the impact of on our lives, not just what they should be doing differently when we let them do the same thing for 30 years with no consequences or repercussions. We all have to take some responsibility in that.
In your opinion, has this Biden-Harris ticket presented a campaign that has sufficiently, for you personally, have they sold you on what they're going to do when they get into office? And what would you say to someone that said, you know what, I voted in the primary, I wanted Bernie, I wanted Elizabeth Warren, we got Biden, I'm not voting for him, I'm going to sit this one out? What would you say to someone like that?
Who?
Let's go with you, Anwar.
As a progressive who's a member of the Justice Democrats, who is wearing a TYT, the election is coming t-shirt, who is put blood, sweat, tears, volunteer hours into trying to change the system. So what? Get over it, Buttercup, is what I would say, right? Like, no meaningful change happens quickly in America. Black folks have been fighting for freedom since 1619 in this country, and we've made incremental progress, right? Like, we have to understand that a lot of times not getting everything you want doesn't feel good in the moment, but Donald Trump does not care about anyone but Donald Trump. That's really my main issue with him, is that he is a malignant narcissist. So trying to even leverage political power or vote against a person like Donald Trump, who doesn't believe in doesn't believe in the system, is a waste of our time. Vote, get him out of office, and then fight the Biden-Harris administration if you don't agree with them. Participate in primaries. In 2 years, another big chunk of the Senate will be open for re-election. Participate in the primary. Fight in your local election. Get a progressive candidate in place. And you know what? Get off of Instagram. Get off of Twitter, talking to people who are in your echo chamber, and go talk to regular people about the impact of politics in their lives. When you get in an Uber, don't shy away from that. That person's probably driving that car not because they want to be, but because they have 3 jobs, they want to be a hardworking American. They don't know that their government should be one that doesn't make them work 3 jobs, right? Because that's just America, right? So that's what you can do. Sitting at home and complaining and putting us all in an existential crisis is just being selfish. And I get it, be mad, but like in Star Wars, use your anger, use your hate, and vote, right? Vote to spite them, don't just give it away.
Brandon?
I mean, if they were that passionate of Bernie and Warren supporters, then they should have gotten on Biden bandwagon months ago when their candidates endorsed Biden. I voted for Bernie in 2016 in the primaries. I voted for Warren in the primaries this year, even though it was clear that Biden had won by the time the primaries got to New York. So, I mean, if you're that passionate about progressive change, then you know the only option is to vote for Biden, right? So there's such a big gap between Trump's policy agenda and the Biden, the Warren and the Bernie policy agendas, and clearly Biden's policies are more in line. And the candidates themselves have said that. So, I mean, I don't know who those people would be. Hopefully those are numbers. But yeah, it's clear that Biden is our guy.
Jimmy?
Well, what Biden is saying nowadays that is really attractive to me is systemic racism, systemic injustices. Recognizing that and articulating it openly says to me that he will attempt to attack this problem. And the Black woman coming behind him will ensure that he does attack those problems, those issues. You see, because prior to him, those issues weren't touched except in Barack Obama's speech on race. These things weren't touched. There was no open discussion about systemic racism in this country. Elizabeth Warren doesn't talk about it. You know, Bernie doesn't talk about it. Joe Biden talks about it. Joe Biden owns up to it. Joe Biden says it does exist. Kamala Harris knows it does exist. She had to deal with it. So Biden, Harris then become the only choice in this election during the entire process. That is the one thing that Jim Clyburn realized when Biden came to Carolina. And Biden actually owes his presidency to Jim Clyburn. And Jim Clyburn owes his ability to speak for Joe Biden at that rally to a little woman who said, they need to hear you say that. Not just you think it, they need to hear you say how much you embrace this man, which is what got Joe Biden over. But acknowledging gives us the ability, and yes, we can then demand accountability. I go back to what I was saying about they come to our community, but we demand nothing. They come in, they visit a church, they hallelujah with us, they say Martin Luther King, civil rights, and we go vote for them. Well, no, we want something for this vote. We demand. We want your platform. We want it publicly announced. And if you don't live up to it, the first opportunity we get, we're sending you home. And that should be up and down. Not just the presidential, that's up and down. Everything.
My fervent prayer and hope, Jesus, is that Biden-Harris will be victorious. We may not know tomorrow. Hopefully we'll know in a few days, and hopefully not a week. But if, I have to allow room for this, if that does not happen, Anwar, I'll start it with you. What can we do? What should we do? What's our first thing that we need to be doing to try to live? I mean, you got COVID-19, you got, all these things. What do we need to be doing if a Biden-Harris ticket isn't the winner?
First, I just want to make a quick point of correction about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and systemic racism. I think that one thing that we have to make sure that we are doing as a community too is also questioning whose narrative we're getting and who's giving us that narrative. Because, like, for example, Elizabeth Warren talked about like Black women dying more in childbirth and other things. And so I think that your point about us connecting what is the policies that we need to work for is really important. I think the same thing. Bernie Sanders has had a full, much more elaborate and detailed plan for criminal justice reform, which has been adopted as part of the Biden-Harris reform. That's what Brandon was talking earlier about, like building coalitions, people who like you share different agreements with, so you can build those policies into a platform. And so my point of saying that is the same thing you would do if Biden-Harris wins, you should do if Trump-Pence wins, which is be involved in the political process, gird your loins, because God knows what's going to happen, but like be involved. Like don't just go home. Like Biden-Harris does not mean we all get to go back to brunch and everything is fine the next day. You should still be questioning your government. You should still be making sure that they're not just doing Martin Luther King civil rights. Look at me, I came here and said the right thing. What did they actually do? I think just like people in this country have to understand that the president is not the king. So do you know how your senator votes for different legislation? And if you are in a place where your senator is trash, get them out of there. Do you know how do you know what district you are in, what House district you're in? And do you know the voting record of your representative in the House, right? Because Congress has the power to block a lot of what the president would do. The problem is that we have unfortunately, sometimes very weak representation that doesn't represent us collectively. And I don't mean it just as Black people. I mean, as working class people, most Black people are in that group, unfortunately. And then we have senators who are so detached from most people's lives because most of them are millionaires that they're not making choices based upon your life. So like those are things that you can do because in 2 years, there will hopefully be, if America still exists, there'll be another election. If America doesn't exist, we got a whole nother set of problems that I am not the right person to ask because I'm from the hood and I'm going to give you a bad answer. So but if America still exists, then let's actually get involved and stay involved.
Brandon, what do we need to do? What needs to happen?
I don't really put much into like positive affirmation and positive thought, but I'm not gonna entertain that negative thought. I'm just gonna focus on Biden and Harris being successful, and that's really all. That's the only place I can really be tonight. So
That's
thank you for the question.
Understood. Jimmy?
I think I'm going to have to go with Brandon on that one. The thing is that one of the things that Anwar said was very important. Most of us don't think about it, don't consider it at all. See, when we elect, for instance, I'll use Barack Obama. We elected Barack Obama, and a lot of us thought that's it.
Yep.
Racism is gone.
Well,
he'll get rid of it. No. There's some things that we still need to do. We need to elect the senators that are going to agree with him, that are going to work with him. We need to elect representatives in the House that are going to work with him. They control the purse strings, that are going to work with him, the budget, the things that he needs to do to help pass all of these bills. Excuse me. And all of these things need to be done concurrently. We need to come down to our local level, make the same demands of the people that we elect locally. We need to tell them, this is what I expect you to do. The first time that you don't do this, the first opportunity I get, you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
You don't elect them over and over and over again just because they look like me.
Mm-hmm.
If they're doing nothing for me and the community, and it's not really me, it's the community. Because what's good for me is not necessarily what's good for the community. I need them to be doing what's good for the community.
Right.
And if they're not doing that, then I need them gone. And so all of those things. But I think I want to stay with Harris and Biden. And there's one thing that I want everybody to understand though. Don't look at what happens tomorrow night. Okay, you're being fed this line that the election's over tomorrow night. No, it's not. Never has been. Never will be.
Come on now.
Okay? You might be able to have a projection on who's going to win, but all the votes counted. Never has been. Never will be. I was in the Philippines. My vote didn't get here on election day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Since 1945, the military has been voting absentee. Those votes are not counted election day. So don't get all upset. Don't get the feeling like things are going awry just because there is no all the votes are not counted for a given state by midnight tomorrow night. Don't worry about that. It'll all work out in the wash.
Gentlemen, this has been absolutely amazing. I appreciate you all coming on the show tonight. I just want a final word from each of you. Perhaps there's someone that's going to catch this now or later, hopefully before tomorrow, that's still undecided. They still think, well, my vote doesn't count. I don't know where my polling place is. Maybe I won't vote. Just give me a couple words from each of you. We'll start with Anwar. We'll go with Brandon and then Jimmy. What would you say to that person?
Oh, you're starting with me. Sorry. Hi, you said that. I'm going to say the same thing that my dad said to me my entire life, which is if you can't vote for someone, you can vote against somebody. And someone died so that you have this right to vote. And so I just really quickly, America started with only rich, land-owning white men as the people who could vote. So if you were not in the 1% white or man, somebody died so that you could vote. It's not just black folks, right? Like women's suffrage didn't just happen. That didn't just happen overnight, right? Like if you're LGBTQIA, people were taking your part of your brain out in the 60s and committing you. You were not getting a vote. Like, people put their lives on the line so you could exercise this power. And if you get involved once and you don't get the result that you want, use that, right? Be angry about that. You actually can change something.
Brandon?
Definitely want to echo what Anwar said and what Mr. Johnson said earlier about economics, right? Biden and Harris have real tangible plans to reduce student loan debt, the burden of student loan debt, to protect Social Security, to ensure that you don't go bankrupt if you have an unforeseen illness, right? So that economic stability is really important to me, and hopefully it's important to you. And so if you have ever felt like, man, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, or I'm working all these jobs just to make ends meet. I mean, I feel like the Biden-Harris ticket promises that to make a substantial impact in your life for the better. So and that's something that Trump hasn't done in the last 4 years, right? So
it made it worse.
To the person who says that my vote doesn't count or it doesn't matter, I would say to you, first of all, about 20% of the Supreme Court decisions that are handed down are 5-4 decisions. Some of those decisions, they gave us Bush in 2000. That was a 5-4 decision, Bush v. Gore. They gave us Miranda in 1965, Miranda versus Arizona, where the police cannot question you without advising you of your rights, one of which is to remain silent. And in 2015, the decision for same-sex marriage was a 5-4 decision. So one vote. And also there was a decision in let's see, that added to your ability to have race considered in college admittance, was a 5-4 decision. So one vote made those things possible. If the person who cast that one said, I think I'll abstain this time, and my vote won't count, and they decided not to, then those things would not have happened. So your one vote can be extremely, extremely important.
Very well said. Very well said. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. This has been absolutely amazing. Please go and vote. I beg you, I implore you. I'm not going to shame you if you don't, but it's just super, super, super important. Next week, join me on the Damon Speaks Show. I will be having Ryan Grace, who is a Black gay mental health professional, on the show. We're going to be talking about all things mental health, continuing our mental health series, talking about mental health issues that affect the gay community specifically. And I kind of think, in my experience, a lot of my friends have been looking for a Black gay therapist or Black queer therapist, and they're kind of like unicorns. So we're going to sit down and have a conversation with him. Thanks again, gentlemen. Stick around. I want to thank you. But for now, we're signing off, and tune in next Monday at 8 p.m. on YouTube and Facebook.